Have you ever lain awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling, running through every financial disaster that could hit you tomorrow? My car could break down. My phone, still not paid off, could die. I could get fired. My pet could need emergency vet care. My landlord could raise the rent. Do any of those sound familiar? What if I told you there's a specific amount of money that silences almost all of them, and that the number is much smaller than you think? I've been carried in people's pockets for years. I've seen what it does to them when I'm empty. I've seen how they change when I'm full. And I can tell you this, the first real transformation doesn't come at $1 million, not even at 100,000. It comes at 10,000. Yes, that might sound small to you, but its effect is far, far greater than you expect. Today, I'm going to tell you why this number is so special, what the psychology and the math behind it actually look like, and why, once you reach it, your life changes quietly but completely.
1. What life looks like without $10,000. You know that moment at the supermarket, calculating whether to grab the name brand or go with the cheaper, lesser-known one? Or when friends suggest dinner and you have to come up with a creative excuse to hide the fact that $20 or $30 would actually put a dent in your budget. For a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, this is the reality. Every financial decision is a scramble to make the numbers work. Every unexpected expense is a potential disaster. You're constantly playing defense with money, a defense that leaves no room to make real choices about your future. But this isn't really just about money. It's about mental energy. Asking yourself, can I afford this, 50 times a day drains you. Every check engine light, every medical bill, every unexpected cost sends you spiraling from a small problem into a full-blown crisis. And that constant state of alarm silences the rest of your brain, the part you need for career decisions, investment ideas, recognizing opportunities. But your brain is so consumed by the fear of survival that it never gets around to any of that. This is exactly where the $10,000 I'm going to talk about today comes in. 2. The brain chemistry changes. Neuroscientists have found that financial security significantly lowers cortisol levels. Cortisol is your body's primary stress hormone. What this means is, reaching $10,000 doesn't just change your finances, it changes the way your body responds to everyday challenges. Let me make this more concrete. The check engine light comes on. If you have no savings, this feels like a countdown to financial disaster. Instant stress. Do you put it on the credit card, borrow from family? How are you going to cover it? A single minor setback feels like a full-blown catastrophe to your brain. But if you have $10,000, that same check engine light becomes a simple inconvenience. You're annoyed, sure, maybe it puts you in a bad mood, but you don't panic because you already have a cushion in place for exactly this kind of unexpected situation. The shift from panic to mild irritation might seem small, but that small shift is enough to directly change your brain. When you're not constantly worried about money, you start making noticeably better, more rational decisions than you did before. You sleep better, you're more productive at work, you're more patient with your family and friends. That feeling of despair, anxiety, and irritability that comes from living under financial stress, you start leaving it behind. Removing that stress frees up mental energy that can actually be redirected toward genuinely improving your situation. Your mind becomes clearer. 3. The emergency fund effect, the truth nobody talks about. Most of the benefit of having $10,000 doesn't come from spending it. It comes from the security of knowing it's there. This is what financial experts call the emergency fund effect, and it's one of the most underrated concepts in personal finance, rarely talked about, yet enormously impactful. An emergency fund isn't really about emergencies, it's about the confidence and peace of mind that comes from knowing you could handle one if it arrived. Most people who save $10,000 never actually spend it on emergencies. Instead, they convert it into opportunity. They invest in education, they start businesses, they move to better locations, or they simply gain the mental space to focus on growing their income because they're no longer consumed by the constant anxiety of basic survival. And even that last point alone has the potential to meaningfully transform a person's life. Beyond that, there's a confidence factor. When you know money is sitting in your account, you carry yourself differently. You negotiate better. You're far more willing to walk away from bad deals because you're not operating from desperation. That confidence tends to lead to better job opportunities, better relationships, and better life outcomes overall. That first $10,000 you save essentially creates a daylight effect on your life. It becomes both a financial safety net and the kind of opportunity that can quietly open new doors for you. 4. Your relationship with risk changes. When your savings are at zero, every decision feels risky. A new job, moving to a different city, or even planning a vacation becomes a major source of stress because a single wrong move could very easily send you into a financial spiral. But when $10,000 is sitting in your account, those same decisions suddenly feel manageable. You might not quit tomorrow to become a professional juggler, but you might finally find the courage to ask for that promotion you've been thinking about for months. You might be willing to invest in a course or certification that could genuinely increase your earning potential, because you have a safety net in place, and because your brain is no longer wrestling with its old anxieties. There's actual room in there for new possibilities. A safety net doesn't make you reckless, but it does move you from survival mode into self-improvement mode. 5. The identity shift. This is the real transformation. If you observe how people who reach $10,000 in savings actually think, you notice something important. Most people treat saving like a temporary diet. They cut their expenses dramatically for a few months, save every penny, and then, as spending naturally reasserts itself, the saved money runs out and they return to their old habits before long. But the people who successfully reach $10,000 don't see saving as a temporary state. They see themselves as a different kind of person, someone who looks at money through a fundamentally different lens. This identity shift is critical because it affects every single financial decision you make. When you genuinely see yourself as someone who saves, and you've truly internalized that identity, you start noticing expense reduction opportunities you never saw before. You become more creative and more motivated to find additional income streams. Instead of chasing immediate gratification or spending money carelessly, you start thinking long-term. And here's the beautiful part of this process. It gets easier. You get used to it. Saving the first $1,000 is genuinely difficult. It requires meaningful lifestyle changes and constant willpower. But the second $1,000 is noticeably easier because you've already changed your habits, already shifted your perspective. By the time you're working toward the fifth or sixth $1,000, the process feels almost automatic, easy, effortless. 6. The practical math. What does $10,000 actually cover for you? Vehicle repairs. It covers almost everything short of a full engine replacement. Most car breakdowns run somewhere between $500 and $3,000 to fix. With $10,000, car trouble goes from a financial catastrophe to a minor inconvenience. You're no longer lying awake at night wondering what you'll do if something goes wrong with your car and you have nothing saved. Medical emergencies become manageable too, and this matters enormously. Even without comprehensive insurance, most emergency room visits, checkups, or minor procedures fall well within what $10,000 can handle. It won't cover a major surgery, but it does cover the vast majority of unexpected health situations that come up. Job loss is probably the most terrifying financial scenario for most people. With $10,000 in savings, that fear suddenly becomes something you can actually survive. Depending on your expenses, $10,000 buys you a 3 to 6 month window to find your next position. That means instead of desperately accepting the first offer that comes along just to stay afloat, you have the breathing room to be selective about your next opportunity. But here's where things get genuinely interesting. $10,000 doesn't just protect you from disasters, it creates opportunities that simply wouldn't exist otherwise. Say you hear about a certification program that could increase your salary by $10,000 a year, but it requires $2,000 up front. Without savings, that's impossible. With a financial foundation in place, it's an obvious investment. You're spending money to make more money, a genuine investment in your future. Or imagine a friend tells you they're starting a business and looking for a small investor. Without savings, all you can offer is your best wishes. With $10,000, you have the option to participate in something that could meaningfully change your financial trajectory. 7. Sleep, relationships, and social dynamics. Research shows that people with an emergency fund experience a measurably significant improvement in sleep quality compared to people with no savings. The same research also highlights that stress is one of the leading causes of poor sleep. Eliminating that stress leads to an immediate improvement in your overall health. Your relationships improve too. Financial stress is consistently cited as one of the primary causes of divorce and family conflict. When you're not constantly worrying about bills, you have more emotional energy to invest in the people who matter to you. You're less irritable, less anxious, and more genuinely present in your interactions with others. When you shed the weight of so many anxieties pressing down on your shoulders, you become a meaningfully different person. And I want to talk about job interviews too. When you don't desperately need the position, you walk into interviews differently. You're far more willing to negotiate salary and benefits because you're not negotiating from a position of weakness. Because you can now say to yourself, even if this particular job doesn't work out, I have money that will keep me going for a while, and I have the time and the financial strength to find something that actually meets my needs. That confidence tends to lead to better job offers and higher compensation, creating a positive cycle that accelerates your financial progress.
8. Decision fatigue, the thing nobody mentions. There's a thing called decision fatigue. Every day you're making thousands of small financial decisions. Name brand or store brand? Can I afford to buy lunch today or should I bring something from home? Premium fuel or regular? Every one of these micro decisions burns mental energy, and by the end of the day, you feel drained from constantly calculating what you can and can't afford. But here's what happens when you have $10,000. 90% of those daily financial decisions suddenly become irrelevant. When you're not worried about the money in your account, you're not choosing between name brand and store brand pasta based on price. You're choosing based on what you actually want. You have the freedom to choose. This might sound like a small thing, but think about how much mental energy gets freed up when you stop making 40 survival-based calculations a day. That leftover energy becomes available for things that actually matter. I once came across someone who described reaching $10,000 this way. The first time they walked into a grocery store afterward, they nearly cried. Not because they went wild buying caviar or expensive champagne, but because they realized they were shopping based on what they actually wanted to eat, not what they could afford. That is a level of freedom most people don't even notice is missing until they experience it for themselves, and that freedom is genuinely priceless. 9. You start thinking about money differently. When you reach $10,000, the way you think about money itself begins to change. Even your fundamental relationship with it shifts. Instead of seeing it as something that simply disappears with every pay cycle, you start seeing it as a tool that multiplies and diversifies your options. When you have no savings or you're in debt, money feels scarce and finite. Every dollar spent feels like a dollar gone forever. But once you have $10,000 as a financial foundation, you start to genuinely understand that money can actually create more money. Money attracts money, and the feeling of financial freedom begins to draw a kind of peace with it. People start becoming interested in concepts like investing, supplemental income, and passive income, not because they've suddenly transformed into financial geniuses, but because they finally have the mental space and the peace of mind to think beyond just covering their basic expenses. When you stop worrying about rent, you can start wondering about retirement accounts. When you're no longer stressed about grocery bills, when you're not spending more mental energy on them than they deserve, you can actually research stock market investing. And there's something very important you should know. A person who has saved $10,000 is actually closer to financial independence than someone who earns twice as much but has nothing saved. More at peace, a calmer mind. Why? Because the person who saves has developed the single most important skill in building wealth, not earning money, but holding on to the money that's been earned. 8. How do you get started?
If you're currently living paycheck to paycheck, $10,000 might feel like an unreachable target. Here's the good news: you don't have to save it all at once. In fact, it's better if you don't, because trying to save aggressively all at once isn't particularly sustainable. The most successful savers I've come across started with laughably small amounts, maybe $50 a month, maybe even $25. What actually matters isn't the size of the contribution, it's the consistency. Once you've established the habit of saving something every month, you can gradually increase the amount as your income grows, or as you find ways to reduce your expenses. Let's do a realistic calculation. The average American spends over $3,000 a year on coffee, dining out, and convenience purchases. And that's without even counting larger expenses. If you could redirect just 1/3 of that spending into savings, you could reach $10,000 in under 3 years. And if you also find a way to put that money to work as you build it, you could get there significantly faster. If you'd like tactics on how to make your money work for you, let me know in the comments. That's something I can put a video on. Feel free to share your thoughts down there. I'm not telling you to give up coffee or never go to a restaurant again. Of course you will. That's part of how you recharge and enjoy life. But what I am pointing out is that most people have more budget flexibility than they realize. Don't let that flexibility go to waste. $10,000 is not just a number. It's the shift from staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning to sleeping soundly, from panic to mild irritation, from defense to opportunity, from surviving to choosing. That's a genuinely profound transformation. And I can tell you this, the thing that changes people most isn't large numbers. This is simply the first real buffer. The process continues from here. 10,000 becomes 20,000, and before long you may find yourself in a level of comfort you couldn't have imagined. The person you become on the way to $10,000 is a far more valuable gain than the amount sitting in your account. Because that person now knows how to save, and someone who knows how to save even more, and someone who saves even more is the person who wakes up one morning to find money already waiting in their account. That is a beautiful kind of momentum, one that can carry you somewhere genuinely remarkable. Money earned while sleeping, without sending a single email, without carrying a single worry. That is the kind of thing that lives in a lot of people's dreams, and it is within your reach. Nothing about it is beyond what a little discipline and consistency can achieve. Start today, the earlier the better. And if you want to see the extraordinary changes that lie just one step beyond the $10,000 we talked about in this video, make sure you check out my earlier video on $20,000. See you in the next one.